In Tolkien's books, Thranduil is a mysterious and distant figure. In The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, he appears only briefly, remaining a tertiary character with motives that are never fully explained. He differs greatly from the familiar image of elven lords, proud, cold, even detached. Only in the appendices, the history of Middle-earth, and other supplementary texts does the author shed a little more light on his past. Things are quite different in Peter Jackson's Hobbit film trilogy. On screen, Thranduil is one of the most vivid and charismatic characters, easily overshadowing many of the main heroes. Much of this is thanks to actor Lee Pace, as well as the makeup and design teams, who created a dazzlingly beautiful yet dark and conflicted king. But the biggest difference is that Jackson gave Thranduil an expanded biography. He invented personal dramas, inner conflicts, and a tragic detail from the past. According to the director, in his youth, Thranduil fought in terrible wars where his face was disfigured. He hides these scars with magic, but at a key moment he lifts the enchantment and reveals them, a silent testimony to the horrors he endured. In the film he says, "I do not speak to me of dragonfire. I have seen his wrath and his power. I fought against the great serpents of the north." It becomes clear that in Jackson's cinematic version, the scars came from battling dragons. Yet Tolkien never mentioned any scars, nor any such episode in the life of the Woodland Realm's king. However, if we use a bit of imagination and weave this detail carefully into canon, there are a few historical events in Middle-earth in which Thranduil could theoretically have received such wounds. Let's examine three possible versions. Book version, The War of the Last Alliance. If we stick to Tolkien's canon, the only war confirmed to have involved Thranduil is the War of the Last Alliance of Elves and Men against Sauron, the same conflict in which Isildur cut the One Ring from the Dark Lord's hand, depriving him of his physical form. At that time, the Woodland Realm, then called Greenwood the Great, was ruled by Orifer, Thranduil's father. Despite mistrust toward the Noldor, Orifer joined High King Gil-galad's host to put an end to Sauron's power. Orifer and Thranduil led their forces into battle, but being less prepared and worse armed than the Noldor, and refusing to follow allied commands, they suffered devastating losses. Orifer was killed, and Thranduil lost not only his father but many of his kin. True, there were no dragons in that war, but fierce battles with orcs, trolls, and the Nazgul, as well as the siege of Barad-dûr, could easily have left deep scars on the elf's face and soul. From a logical and chronological standpoint, the War of the Last Alliance is the most likely source of Jackson's scars, Peter Jackson's version. Number 1. Wars with the Northern Dragons. In the far north of Middle-earth, wars with dragons truly did rage in ancient times. After Moria was destroyed by a Balrog, some dwarves resettled in the Grey Mountains. The wealth of their halls quickly attracted the northern dragons, and a long, bloody feud began. Dragons burned cities and slew kings. Among the dead were Dain, Fön, and his son Fror. Eventually, the dwarves were forced to abandon the region. In such battles, one could easily have received terrible scars, especially against massive, cunning, and intelligent serpents. However, there is no record of the woodland elves' involvement in these wars. Dwarves seldom sought help from the Sindar, and Thranduil, in fact, had moved his people away from lands where dwarven influence was growing. For that reason, the king's participation in these battles is doubtful. Peter Jackson's version number 2, The Fall of Gondolin. In one rumoured version of the script, it was suggested that Thranduil received his scars during the fall of Gondolind, the legendary elven city of the First Age in Beleriand. Gondolin had been hidden from Morgoth, but betrayal by one of its people revealed the way. Morgoth's armies invaded, including fire-breathing dragons that scorched everything in their path. In the chaos of that battle, it would be entirely possible to receive burns like those of Jackson's Thranduil. However, in canon, Thranduil and his father Orifer hailed from Doriath and had no ties to Gondolin. There is no evidence that the Sindar took part in its defence. Thus, This version is more of a dramatic legend than a real explanation, which is closer to the truth. Canonically, it makes the most sense to link Thranduil's scars to the War of the Last Alliance. But in terms of cinematic drama, the fall of Gondolin is far more spectacular and tragic. Perhaps that is why Jackson chose The Great Serpents of the North, a story that leaves room for imagination while avoiding direct contradictions to the books. Either way, this biographical element became a defining trait of his film portrayal. It emphasized that behind Thranduil's cold beauty lies the pain of millennia and the experience of a warrior who has survived horrors he would rather not speak of.